with a lot of issues that happen where your body becomes tight or you're feeling things that you don't normally feel, when you can get sensitive to what caused them in the first place. For me, you know, where was I holding? Where was I being rigid? Because the neck seems to be a lot about rigidity in your thought or your action. And coming to you, I knew I could get that softness and have that release. And it was pretty intense. I think when I saw you the last time, it was the most intense. It wasn't an injury, but I felt physically that really needed that subtle work that you do. So can you explain a little bit about, you know, do you use holds? Is it just hands-on? Is there any manipulation that goes along with it?
One of the things I really like about what I do now is, of course, the obvious thing is that I spent the large part of my life dealing with a surgical procedure, basically, operating in people's mouths when they were awake, which was a fairly challenging experience on both sides.
Yes.
Now my tendency is to be very gentle and to help people to feel good without that type of interaction. Right. And so I get to use some qualities that I didn't get to use so much before, even though they were important also before, but now they're critical. And that is the idea of operating intuitively and deciding how to use the tool bag that I've learned.
Right.
So that's a whole different experience than my previous experience, and it's very powerful, and it has opened my own being up in a way that I never had dreamed of before. So the essence of it is that I intuitively decide or work towards where I'm going to approach, and then use certain holds, which can be either efferent holds, which means I can either put energy into the hold, or what we call non-efferent holds, which is where I'm putting no energy into the hold. I'm just being there to allow the person's inner wisdom to heal themselves. And those are therapeutic choices that I need to make intuitively during the process of the treatment.
And that is a really good point you just made about the inner wisdom of the client, the person that you're working with. I think as subtle energetic healers, since I do similar work as you and have studied actually with you, that's one of the most important keys, is to know that each being has an inner healer, an inner wisdom that knows exactly what we need, and exactly what to bring to us, and can be facilitated by a therapist in waking up.
Which brings up another aspect of this work that's so appealing to me, and that is the idea of neutral. Allowing and invoking a space where there's safety is so important. So if the client feels that they're not safe, or that they're in a circumstance of therapy, so to speak, you know, where there's this kind of different feeling, it's not as effective. What really works is for me to help the person to feel very safe so that they can drop in. So that seems to be the essence of the beginning of the treatment, for sure. Once we get going, then all kinds of things can happen, you know. But that beginning from a safe, neutral spot seems to be very important.
So when a client comes, they're fully dressed on the table, on the massage table, and you're working through their whole body, or?
I may be working anywhere on their body.
Okay, so it could be the feet or the legs, even if the issue isn't there, that they're aware of. It could still begin there.
A lot depends on the person's previous experiences with trauma and stress. If they have had experiences of being traumatized, abused, or stressed severely, really at any time in their life, if they're still holding that energy, then my approach will be very, very subtle. And I may even work off the body for a while, because they have this huge energy of hypervigilance, where they are extremely aware of everything. Anything that comes into their field is going to be perceived as a possible danger.
Right.
So that's the more abused person, or the traumatized person. In the more relaxed or centered person, a person comes in fairly centered, then we just can go into it a little bit more deeply, more quickly.
Right.
So there's a saying in craniosacral care, and that is that you can't go too deep, you can only go too fast.
Right, right, which is great. So then the client is going to really feel safe because you've set that up within yourself.
Right.
And you work on yourself as well. It's not just you working on the client before they get there or just as they're there. I know that you do this, a whole centering of yourself as well.
Right. Yeah. If the client is more centered than I am, then I'm going to receive the session.
Right.
And I should really pay them.
Yes. But we know that doesn't ever happen.
No.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah. So what kind of results do your clients receive?
Well, it varies tremendously, but the intended result is to relieve their suffering, to elevate their sense of well-being and their connection with their own center and their own being, so that they can feel when they leave that something has really been gained by them. If something has not been, if they don't feel that way when they leave, I invite them to come back and to work through that, because we have a certain given amount of time in a session, and there are times when the person comes very loaded and everything can't be done in one session.
No.
Sometimes we need more.
It's one layer at a time.
Right.
Right. So if they came in for something physical, you know, like let's say they had shoulders. Yeah, a shoulder, that's one. Does it sometimes take time for the work to show itself as well? Do you ever get that response?
It can. And which brings up another point to my mind, and that is that I might not immediately work on their shoulder.
Right, because that may not be the main issue.
Right. As a matter of fact, very often it isn't. And so if I get the idea that there are other areas that I need to work on first, I may work on the feet first.
Right.
And work towards the shoulder, and then eventually I usually in that session will work some on the affected part.
Right.
And then we go from there.
Right. So, and also, let's say working on the shoulder, do you find that like the point of origin could be even different than what's going on in the shoulder?
Yes, it could. And I think the principle involved here is that everything's connected.
Yes.
So that anywhere we work,
right,
there will be an effect somewhere else. And I think that it's very easy to illustrate that if you sit quietly and just turn your head from side to side, or to one side even, and notice that other areas of your body move as well. Okay. So you can't move any part of your body or have an effect on any part of your body without having an effect elsewhere.
Right.
And so those connections are what we're looking for.
Right.
To resolve those.
So what is the relationship between the fluid, the craniosacral fluid, and the bones?
Well, in order to answer that question effectively, I think I have to tell you how this all began.
Okay.
And it began with a man named William Sutherland. He was a student, and he was walking by a display, and he noticed a skull that was where all the parts were completely separated. It's called a Beauchene skull, and they're in relationship to one another. And he noticed that the bones actually fit together in such a way like the gills of a fish, which suggested to him that they must move. And so that movement is something that he revolutionized the field of medicine when he recognized that, because prior to that, people believed that the bones of the skull were fixed in place and never moved. So he began to study that, and he had different ways of studying it on himself, and he never told anybody for the longest time until he had all of his data together. But he realized that the craniosacral fluids which are contained within that skull, are effectively moving the bones and energetically moving them as well. And that movement is transmitted through the entire body.